worst part wasn't being left out. The worst part was realizing I'd handed them the key to do it. I remember the exact moment I signed the paperwork on that condo. February, 8 years ago. My son was standing next to me at the title company's desk, wearing the same blue tie he'd worn to his college graduation, and he kept squeezing my shoulder every time I had to initial something. There were a lot of initials. It was a $340,000 unit on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Charlotte, 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a parking garage underneath. My name was the only one on the deed. His name wasn't anywhere on it. That was important later. I paid the mortgage every month because my son had just started his career in IT project management, and his then-girlfriend, now wife, was finishing her real estate licensing. They needed somewhere to live. I had the money. My husband, Gerald, had passed 3 years before, and the life insurance, combined with what I'd saved from 31 years teaching elementary school, meant I could do this. I wanted to do this. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself Gerald would have approved. I told myself a lot of things in those years. Her name is Stacy. She got her license the spring after they moved in, and within 2 years she had a client list and a good reputation, and wore blazers that cost more than my first car. I always liked the idea of her more than the reality. In the idea, she was a young woman working hard to make something of herself. In reality, she had opinions about everything: how my son spent his weekends, which friends he stayed in touch with, and, eventually, how often he called me. They got married on a Saturday in October 4 years ago. Beautiful wedding. I paid for part of it. Not all of it, but a meaningful part. The flowers, the rehearsal dinner, the photographer. I didn't ask for credit. I didn't want credit. I just wanted to be there. And I was there for a while. Sunday dinners occasionally. A Christmas here and there. My granddaughter Emma was born 2 years into the marriage, and for a little while things felt almost normal. I would drive up to Charlotte on a Thursday evening and babysit while they went to dinner, and Emma would fall asleep on my chest, and I would sit in the dark of that beautiful condo, the one I was still paying for, and feel genuinely lucky. Then things started to shift in a way I couldn't quite name. Dinners got rescheduled. Phone calls from my son got shorter. When I asked to come up for Emma's 2nd birthday, Stacy said they were keeping it small. Just the 3 of them. A family thing. I didn't push. I told myself she was protective of her routines. Some people are. I kept paying the mortgage. The call I keep returning to happened on a Tuesday in March. My son called, which was unusual. He usually texted, and his voice had that careful, practiced tone that told me he had thought about what he was going to say before he said it. He told me that Stacy had been feeling like things were unbalanced, that I had a tendency to make her feel like a guest in her own home, that when I visited, I would rearrange things in the kitchen and comment on how Emma's hair was done, and that these things added up. He said he hoped I would understand. I asked him if he felt that way too. He paused for a moment longer than he should have. Then he said, "I think she just needs more space, Mom." I said I understood. I didn't hang up angry. I drove to the grocery store, bought a rotisserie chicken and a bag of salad, and sat at my kitchen table in Greensboro and ate alone and tried to figure out when I had become someone who needed to be managed. I gave them the space. 6 weeks passed. 8 weeks. I sent birthday cards and didn't follow up about whether they arrived. I texted my son on Easter Sunday and got back a picture of Emma in a yellow dress holding a basket. It was a group text. He had sent it to at least 15 people. In June, my son called again. This time the practiced tone was gone. He sounded almost excited. He told me that he and Stacy were planning a 2-week trip to Alaska in August, a cruise. They'd booked a cabin on one of the big lines, the kind that stops at Juneau and Skagway and Glacier Bay. They were bringing Emma. He said it was going to be something they'd always remember. I said it sounded wonderful. He said, "Yeah, we're really excited." Then there was a small pause. "It's going to be just the 3 of us, Mom. Stacy really wants it to be our own little family trip." I heard him fine. I said I completely understood. Have a wonderful time." I got off the phone and stood in my kitchen for a long time without moving. I wasn't on the cruise. I wasn't invited. But I was still paying the mortgage on the place they come home to. I want to be careful here because what happened next wasn't anger, exactly. It wasn't a snap decision made in a bad moment. It was something quieter than that, and I think more honest. I sat with it for 2 days. I took a long walk around my neighborhood, and I thought about Gerald and what he would have said. And I thought about the 31 years of second-grade classrooms and parent conferences, and the summer I worked a second job so I could put money into my son's 529 account. And I thought about the title company and the blue tie and the initials. And then I thought about what my name was on. I called my attorney on a Thursday morning. Her name is Beverly. We've known each other for 20 years. She handled Gerald's estate. I told her I wanted to sell the condo in Charlotte. She asked me a few questions. Were there any other names on the deed? No. Had I given anyone a right of first refusal in writing? No. Was there a tenant in place with a lease? No. She said, "Then it's your property to sell." I asked her to start the process quietly. She did. I want to address something directly because I know it's the first question anyone asks. Yes, my son and Stacy were living there. That created a practical complication, not a legal one, because no lease had ever been signed. I'd never charged them rent, never put anything on paper. They were, in the eyes of North Carolina property law, month-to-month occupants in a property I owned outright. My attorney sent a formal notice to the address. They were out of the country and had not started the cruise yet, so it was received by a neighbor who was collecting their mail, as I later found out. I didn't plan to spring anything on them at the last second. The timeline simply worked out that way because I'd started the process in early July, and the market moved faster than I expected. We had an offer within 3 weeks. A young couple, both nurses, who had been looking in that building for 2 years. They were paying cash. My attorney said she'd rarely seen a cleaner transaction. The closing was scheduled for August 19th. My son and Stacy were due back from Alaska on August 21st. In those weeks between the offer and the closing, I went up to Charlotte 3 times. I had a key, of course. My name was on the deed. I wasn't sneaking in. I moved carefully and I took only what was mine, the framed cross-stitch that Gerald's mother had made, which had hung in the second bedroom since the day I furnished it. 3 boxes of my own kitchen things. The Le Creuset Dutch oven I'd bought myself on a trip to Williams-Sonoma. My grandmother's mixing bowls. A cast-iron skillet that had been in my family since before I was born. Some financial records I'd stored in the hall closet. I left everything of theirs exactly where it was. Emma's drawings were still on the refrigerator. The wedding photo was still on the credenza. I didn't move a thing that belonged to them. On the 3rd visit, I sat for a moment on the couch by the window and looked out at the Charlotte skyline, 14 floors up, the way I'd looked at it so many times when I came to babysit. The lights were just starting to come on across the buildings. I let myself feel it, the years in it, the hope I had put into it, and then I stood up, walked out, and locked the door behind me. The closing went smoothly. I was in Beverly's office at 9 in the morning. I signed, she notarized, and by 10:45 it was done. The funds were wired to my account by end of business that day. Before I left the title company, I wrote a letter, not a long one. I'd thought about it carefully, and I had decided that long would be wrong. Long would make it seem like I was asking for something, defending myself, waiting for a response. I wasn't. I wrote 4 short paragraphs on plain paper. The first said that the condo had been sold as of that date, and that the new owners would be taking possession within the week. I gave the name of the property management company that had agreed to handle a 30-day personal property storage arrangement, where their belongings would be held at no cost to them while they made arrangements. I included a phone number. The second said that I had covered the cost of the storage as a courtesy, and that I wished them no difficulty in finding a new home. The third said that I was returning to Greensboro, and that I would not be reachable at any phone number or address they had for me while I got settled. The fourth was just 1 sentence. It said, "I hope Alaska was everything you wanted it to be." I left a copy of the letter on the kitchen counter. I left a second copy with the building's front desk manager in a sealed envelope with my son's name on the outside. Then I went home. I had already made arrangements I hadn't mentioned to anyone. 3 months before all of this, before the Alaska announcement, before anything, I had started looking at small properties in the Outer Banks. I'd spent summers there as a child, at my aunt's cottage in Nag's Head, and there was something about it that had stayed with me for 63 years. When Gerald was alive, we always talked about retiring there. We just never got around to it. I had been renting a small place in Kill Devil Hills on a month-to-month basis since May, just to see if I could stand it, just to see if 63 years of memory held up to being lived in. It did. The salt air in the morning, the way the light came across the water in the late afternoon, a farmer's market on Saturdays where an older man sold honey in mason jars and always called me neighbor. After the closing, I drove the 3.5 hours from Charlotte to Kill Devil Hills with my car packed and my Dutch oven in the back seat. I stopped once for gas and a cup of coffee. I called Beverly from the road to confirm everything had cleared. She told me it had. I thanked her. I want to say what those first days were like because they weren't triumphant exactly, and I think anyone who's been through something like this would understand that. I cried once the second night, sitting on the small deck of the rental looking at the Atlantic. Not from regret. I want to be clear about that. I cried because I was grieving something I'd been pretending wasn't already gone. The version of my son that would never have let this happen. He called on August 22nd, the day after they got back. I didn't answer. He called 3 more times over the next 2 days. I texted him on the 3rd day, just 3 lines. I told him I was safe, I was not in distress, and that I needed some time and would reach out when I was ready. He texted back immediately, "Mom, please call me. We need to talk about the condo." I put the phone face down on the kitchen table and went for a walk on the beach. There is something I want to say about that walk, and about the ones that came after it. I had spent the better part of 8 years arranging my life to be useful to people who had quietly stopped including me. I had paid a mortgage. I had babysat. I had driven 4 hours round trip for birthday parties. I had kept myself small enough not to inconvenience anyone. And walking on that beach with the wind off the water, I didn't feel any of that. I just felt the sand. I just felt my own 2 feet. My son and Stacy did find a place. I know this because my son eventually wrote me a long email about 3 weeks after they got home. He explained what they'd gone through. The hotels, the scramble, the storage unit, how hard it had been for Emma. He was not unkind in it, but he wanted me to understand the disruption I had caused. I read the email 3 times. I wrote back once. I kept mine shorter than his. I told him I understood they'd had a difficult few weeks and I was genuinely sorry for Emma's disruption. She's 4 years old and she had nothing to do with any of this. I told him that I also wanted him to understand something. The condo had been in my name for 8 years. The mortgage had come from my accounts every month, and in all that time I had been told in various ways that I was too present, too much, not what they needed. I told him that I had taken that feedback seriously. I told him that I had made adjustments accordingly. I didn't say anything cruel. I didn't itemize what I'd spent over the years. I didn't say what I could have said about the morning in March when he paused a half-second too long before choosing his wife's comfort over telling me the truth. I just told him that I loved him, that I would always love him, and that I needed him to understand that loving someone does not mean making yourself indefinitely available to be treated as secondary. He didn't write back for a week. When he did, it was 2 sentences. He said he needed time to process. He said he hoped I was okay. I wrote back, "I'm more than okay. I'm in Kill Devil Hills. I've been here 6 months now. I adopted a dog in October, a 7-year-old beagle mix named George, who had been passed over at the shelter because he was too old. He sleeps at the foot of my bed and has strong opinions about squirrels. The farmer's market man and I have become genuine friends. His name is Paul, and he lost his wife 2 years ago, and we walk along the water most Sunday mornings and talk about our gardens and our children and the way time moves differently once you stop trying to hold it in place. My son and I have spoken on the phone twice since August. The conversations are careful, the way conversations are when two people are trying to find a new footing without admitting that the old one is gone. I don't know what it becomes from here. I know I am not waiting anymore. I know I am not managing myself down to a size that fits inside someone else's comfort. Emma sent me a drawing in December. A crayon drawing of a woman with gray hair standing next to the ocean, with a small brown dog beside her. There was a sun in the corner with a smiley face and the words, in her 4-year-old handwriting, "Grandma House." I have it on my refrigerator. It's the most honest thing anyone in that family has sent me in years. An image of a woman standing beside the water, with a dog, with a house that belongs entirely to her. That's exactly where I am. I've thought a lot about what my son and Stacy actually taught me, and I don't mean that bitterly. I mean it plainly, the way you mean it when something finally settles into focus after years of being just slightly blurred. What they taught me is that generosity without boundaries doesn't read as love. It reads as availability, and available people, over time, become easy to overlook. I paid the mortgage on that condo for 8 years. I drove 4 hours round trip to babysit. I wrote checks for flowers and rehearsal dinners and photographers. I did all of that because I wanted to, and I'd do the same things again. But I understand now what I didn't understand then, that none of it protected me from being slowly moved to the edge of things. Because I never once said, this is what I need in return. I just kept giving and kept adjusting and kept telling myself that the relationship would balance out eventually on its own. It doesn't work that way. I know that now. Relationships don't balance themselves. People find the level where things are comfortable for them and they stay there. And if you've made it comfortable for someone to take without giving back, that's where they'll stay too. Not out of cruelty most of the time, but just because no one ever asked them to do otherwise. The morning my son told me I wasn't coming to Alaska, something shifted in me that I can only describe as clarity. Not rage, not grief. Just a very quiet understanding that I had been waiting for something that was not coming. I had been waiting for my son to see me the way I saw him, as someone worth including, worth making room for, worth a phone call that wasn't preceded by a rehearsal. And he wasn't going to, not while everything stayed the way it was. So I changed what I could change. I acted on what I actually controlled. The condo was mine. The decision was mine. And for the first time in a long time, so was the morning after. There's something about doing one honest, clear-eyed thing after years of small accommodations that changes how you carry yourself. I drove to Kill Devil Hills with my Dutch oven in the back seat, and I didn't feel like a woman who had been wronged. I felt like a woman who had finally stopped asking permission to take up space. That's not a small thing. For a lot of women my age, that's everything. Emma's drawing is still on my refrigerator. A gray-haired woman, a brown dog, the ocean. She drew what she understood. Her grandmother is somewhere near the water now, and the house belongs to her. Children see clearly when we let them. I think about that sometimes. How much Emma absorbed just from watching, and what she'll carry with her about what it looks like when a woman decides she's enough. I hope she remembers this version of me. Not the one who kept quiet in other people's kitchens. This one, here, with George asleep at my feet and the Atlantic out the window and a life that fits exactly the shape of who I actually am. That's what I want her to know someday, that it's never too late to stop shrinking, that the most important thing you can build is not a house for someone else, but a life you don't need to be invited into.